Hey, welcome to #Malkin Live. I'm coming to you a little earlier than normal, but that's because there's so much pressing going on. And we're going to talk about the DACA ruling. We're going to talk about what's expected with #ExpandTheBan. If anything, if we're going to get more bad news than good news, and talk about the work of my next guest, Mark Krikorian of the Center for Immigration Studies. I'm going to bring him in right now. Hey, Mark.
Good morning.
Oh, it's not like there's anything to talk about today.
No, it's a slow news day. I was going to go mow my lawn, actually.
Well, thank you so much for taking time
Sure.
to join us. And, you've been holding down the fort at the swamp there with your team at the Center for Immigration Studies. And you had a great panel in the wake of the DACA ruling yesterday. I want to start out by talking, this is just a launching point. Our friend Pedro Gonzalez has a column at Town Hall called Contra DACA. And he goes through the many reasons why the DACA recipients are not the best and brightest, as many in the public seem to perceive them from all of the polls that were cited by mainstream media, Politico, CBS, purportedly showing that, quote, large majorities of Republicans as well as almost all Democrats favor allowing immigrants brought into the U.S. illegally as children to stay. There's a perception of them as children. They've been teenagers for how long now since DACA was?
Well, they're in their 30s now. I think
right.
Some of them are 40 now.
Right. So. Right, exactly. And of course, a lot of them were of indeterminate age to begin with.
Right.
But Pedro cites a lot of statistics regarding the criminal backgrounds and the educational backgrounds, which sort of contradict what the DACA requirements were supposed to be. Can you talk about that a little bit, the perception of DACA versus the reality of DACA recipients?
Sure. Now, for people who aren't familiar with it, DACA is basically an executive action, not even an executive order. It's just a memo from the Obama administration back in 2012, so it's been around for a while, to let illegal immigrants who came before they turned 16 and then met some other requirements, supposedly they were in school or what have you, to get work permits. They talk about it as shielding from deportation. There was very little likelihood they were going to get deported anyway. That wasn't the point. The point was work permits, because you get a work permit, you get a social security number, you get a driver's license, you get rooted in society. I mean, that was the point. And that was the group. Remember, these are called dreamers. That was the marketing term that the amnesty people used. Illegal immigrants who came when they were young are called dreamers. The whole point of this dreamer push was that they would hold up a sympathetic person, young man, came here at 18 months old, spent his whole life here, never stepped foot in Mexico, doesn't know enough Spanish to order at Taco Bell, is the, valedictorian at his high school, and is dead set on joining the Marine Corps so he can hunt down America's enemies and kill them.
Right.
Therefore, all 12 million illegal aliens should get amnesty. It was a marketing gimmick.
Yes.
And the fact is, there are a few people like that, but it was a marketing gimmick to pull everybody over the amnesty finish line. Congress twice tried to pass it and failed. Democrat Congresses. So in 2012, in the run up to the election, Obama's people said, look, Hispanic registration is down. I actually heard this secondhand from somebody who talked to a person who was in the room. So it's secondhand, but I believe it. They were worried about Mitt Romney. Now, it's sort of silly now to think that they were worried about Mitt Romney, but they were. So they said, look, we have to do something dramatic. And Mr. President, we know you said that giving work permits to these DACAs is something beyond your authority, because Obama said it over and over again that he couldn't do it. But, we need to get reelected here, so who cares? So they did this DACA thing 8 years ago this month. Work permits, it was about 750,000 people got them. But over the years, some of them have gotten married, some have been deported because they're criminals, whatever it is. So there's about 650,000 people who have DACA work permits, good for 2 years at a time. Trump ran in 2016 saying on day one, we're going to cancel this unconstitutional illegal program. And in fact, it is illegal. Well, Day one came and went. I don't know if you were following it, but I was writing in the corner. I was like, okay, day one, what happened?
Yes.
Day two.
Yes.
Okay.
TikTok.
Yeah.
Chop, chop.
Day 200, they finally ended it because Attorney General Sessions boxed them in by issuing a letter saying it's an illegal program. It needs to be ended. DHS said, okay. So they ended it. Of course, immediately the other side runs to federal court in San Francisco. They got a injunction saying that the unwinding of the program, and it was unwinding. They were giving people 6 months. It was actually a prudent, sensible way of backing out of this thing. It wasn't all at once. It wasn't cold turkey. Well, it's been on hold. Basically, the courts have said, Mr. President, you can't cancel a memo that the previous administration issued until the Supreme Court tells you how you can do it. Right. And so this week's ruling was ludicrous. I mean, it was a John Roberts special where the 4 Democrats on the Supreme Court, and look, it's a legislature, so we can talk about them as Democrats and Republicans.
You can make party affiliations known.
Right. And Roberts wrote the decision, and it was like the Obamacare decision in that he sort of redefined reality to fit the policy conclusion he wanted to reach. Justice Thomas, in his dissent, basically said, look, this is a political decision to avoid, which is legally obvious what to do here. And yet this is a political decision. But it's not over. The court did not say that DACA is lawful. The court actually implicitly said DACA is illegal. Because, and not to get into the weeds or anything, but one of the decisions, the first thing the court had to decide is, are judges even allowed to hear cases about this issue?
Right. Is
it reviewable? That's the way the terminology is. And they said, yes, it is, because it's not just looking the other way, a passive exercise in non-enforcement is what they say. In other words, the Immigration Service didn't just say, well, we're going to sort of let you walk. We'll give you a warning and don't worry about it. That would not be reviewable by the courts. They said, because this is a program that gives a benefit, an immigration benefit, work permits and what have you, therefore it's reviewable. Except Obama said from day one, this does not give a benefit. It's just looking the other way. In other words, he redefined what Obama's own definition of DACA was in order to be able to reach the decision they wanted to reach. It was ridiculous. I mean, really, it's not even like it was a bad, I disagreed with the result. It's a comical, almost ludicrous tying up in pretzels decision.
Yes, and just to make it explicit, and so you can explain this to folks who haven't been following, the reason why Obama had to keep saying over and over again that DACA was not a conferral of an affirmative immigration benefit is because only Congress has the authority to do that.
Right. In fact, the memo from then Homeland Security Secretary Napolitano, remember her as I'd rather forget her, but anyway, she was the one who wrote the memo to her subordinates saying, okay, we're going to do this DACA thing. Yep. The last sentence of the memo says this doesn't give any benefit because only Congress can do that. The memo itself, the DACA memo itself said only Congress can give benefit. So anyway, as far as the decision goes, what it boils down to is they said the Trump administration has to jump through some different hoops before it can unwind this DACA program. Hoops that it already jumped through because they issued 2 memos canceling the program. The first one was kind of more, it was briefer. It was just like, okay, we're canceling this. The second memo a year later was, okay, well, here's in detail, because the lawsuits had already started, here's in detail why it needs to be done. The majority said, yeah, but we can't, that other one is irrelevant because we're not counting that. We're only looking at the first memo. So basically what they said is you have to go back, Xerox that second memo, issue it again, and they're allowing a whole new series of lawsuits before it gets back to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court says, oh yeah, now it's okay. It's a joke. I mean, it really is this, forget about the immigration consequences, are the illegal immigrants, amnesty, whatever it is. This is no way to run a railroad. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah. So you've got the Supreme Court meddling now in dictating the process issues of how to unwind something that a president certainly has the prerogative to do. If one president has the prerogative to do it in the first place, the other one certainly has the prerogative to undo it.
And process issues are important. Let's face it. I mean, that's what constitutionalism is about.
Yes.
These aren't even legitimate process issues.
Exactly.
This is kind of making up, nitpicking.
Yes.
It's, I mean, people say, well, technicalities are important. Yeah, they are, except they're making up things as technicalities rather than saying, well, this is clearly what you have to do and you didn't do it. They went through the steps they needed to go through. The court is just looking for a way to basically run out the clock and hope Biden wins, at which point they'll just cancel the cancellation of DACA and keep it going. You see what I mean?
Exactly. Yes. It's all pretextual.
Right.
So let me read you. This is from Donald Trump's Twitter feed this morning. It's a two-parter, as they often are. The Supreme Court asked us to resubmit on DACA. Nothing was lost or won. They punted, much like a football game where hopefully they would stand for our great American flag. We will be submitting enhanced papers shortly in order to properly fulfill the Supreme Court's ellipses second part ruling and request of yesterday. I have wanted to take care of DACA recipients better than the do-nothing Democrats, but for 2 years they refused to negotiate. They have abandoned DACA based on the decision the Dems can't make DACA citizens. They gained nothing. There's a lot to unpack there. Please do.
Sure. I mean, the key thing that gets people's attention is how, the president has said, and he's been saying this for a long time, I love they're terrific young people and I want to help them. And, I'm kind of a squish on DACA. I mean, not on DACA, but on just this issue, because, if illegal immigrants actually have grown up here, I don't mean they came at 15. I mean, they actually came when they were toddlers and have grown up here. I'm kind of sympathetic to the idea of giving them green cards. Again, I'm a squish on this, but, and this is the big issue that is the stumbling block. We have to make sure we don't have a recurrence of this kind of situation. The only reason we have young people who've grown up here as illegal immigrants is because not only did we allow mass illegal immigration, we didn't do anything about the illegal immigrants who were here in the first place. And so you can't amnesty these people, or they already have an amnesty. You can't upgrade them to amnesty premium from amnesty light, because that's what this is about.
They got platinum status.
Right, exactly. They were platinum cards, not green cards. But you can't do that without including measures to make it less likely you're going to be in this problem 10 years from now with other people who say, well, we're dreamers too, and we need our green card. So you have to have enforcement measures in something, and they have to be up and running before anybody gets any kind of cards, because otherwise they'll just bait and switch and lie to you. The parents cannot be allowed to benefit from these programs, because remember, the reason for DACA, or the rationale behind the DREAM Act, is these kids were not legally responsible for coming here illegally.
Right.
Now, a 15-year-old coming here to work construction, sent by his parents, that's a different situation. But, you come here at 3 years old. Yeah, you didn't do it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But your parents did. They are responsible. Yeah. Why should they be getting basically a delayed amnesty? Because once these kids, if they get green cards, 5 years later, they get citizenship. And then they can apply for their parents. There's no numerical caps. There's no waiting list or any of that stuff. Why would we give a delayed amnesty to the parents who are the ones at fault for bringing these people? So the basic point is, you need a package that not just cleans up the mess of illegal immigrant kids who grew up here, but fixes the problem, turns off the faucet so you don't have more illegal immigrant kids growing up here 5 and 10 years from now.
Exactly. And can you either remind people, refresh, or let them know that for the first time here about the companion DAPA executive order that was adopted at the same time as DACA.
Yeah. Obama got a little greedy, and
Yeah.
they went for first they started with the most sympathetic group of illegal immigrants, people who grew up here as kids. They weren't kids anymore, but they came before they were 16. Then they said, okay, let's do DAPA with a P, which was for the parents of the illegal immigrant parents who had U.S. born kids. So it wasn't the parents of the DACAs. It was parents of people who were illegal, but I mean, the parents were illegal. They had kids here. Anchor babies, the parents of anchor babies. I don't like the term anchor baby. I don't know. It sounds a little derogatory to me, but that DAPA was premised on the idea of anchor babies. In other words, they were saying these kids are anchors. But before it went into effect, unlike DACA, which the Republicans literally did nothing for an entire year before the House of Representatives the Republican House passed a resolution saying DACA is illegal. Well, everybody already had their work permits by then.
Right.
DAPA, the P, it was, they filed suit before it actually got going. Obama's people had a $1 billion slush fund built up in DHS from the fees of other legal immigrants that they kind of skimmed some off and hid it away, but it was stopped in court. And the federal court ruled that it was illegal. And it got to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court was evenly divided so that the lower court decision stood. So the DAPA never went into effect. And then once Trump's people took over, they just canceled it. But that would have been, a couple million illegal immigrants with work permits, social security numbers, driver's licenses, the whole thing. I mean, it's amnesty. It's just amnesty light. It's not amnesty premium, but it's amnesty. That got stopped. The issue now is, will Texas, which is one of the states that filed suit to stop that DAPA, they also had started up a suit against DACA to claim it's illegal. No court has yet ruled on whether DACA is legal or illegal itself. Mm-hmm. They restarted that lawsuit now. And the judge, who's pretty good, Judge Hannon, Texas, has given the parties until next month to give him briefs about how the Supreme Court ruling influences what he should say about DACA. So you could see in a few months, before the election even, federal court ruling saying DACA is illegal, as well as the Attorney General likely to write a longer analysis explaining why he thinks DACA is illegal. So this is, by all the DACA people, the activists were celebrating, yes, we're here to stay, blah, blah, blah. Not so much, no. This is just a delay on the part of the DACA people. In other words, the only benefit they get is delay. This doesn't fix anything. Congress can only fix this.
Although arguably delay is a win for them.
It is. That's what they're thinking, obviously.
Right.
And if Trump gets reelected, though, they're hosed. If Trump loses and the ventriloquist dummy becomes president, then obviously, DACA will just stay in place. And heck, they may try DAPA or something like that, call it different initials, and see if they can get away with it.
Yeah. So translate this for viewers from the Trump duo tweet that I quoted to you. We will be submitting enhanced papers shortly. What does that mean?
Yeah, I think what it means is they're going to Xerox the earlier justification that the court didn't consider. In other words, it went through, here's why we're doing it. Here's the legal basis of it. This is why it's unlawful. And here's the effects it's likely to have. And here's our response. In other words, basically an explanation of what they're doing and why and what the consequences are, which they already did. But the Supreme Court majority said, no, that doesn't count. I mean, it was literally, it's almost like a child's game where somebody's making up rules as you go along. Kids are playing some game. So it shouldn't be something that takes more than a couple of weeks. And if they keep kicking the can down, because there are people in the White House who want DACA to stay in place.
Of course there are. Yes.
Who shall remain unnamed, but there's a lot of them. And the key issue is, are they going to follow through the way the president said and rescind DACA? or not. Because the longer they put that off, the worse, I'm more worried I'm going to be that the immigration squishes in the White House, and frankly, there's a lot of them, will have won out. Hopefully not, but Trump's tweet isn't proof of that, because remember, in April, he tweeted, we're going to suspend immigration. And then they issued a ruling, a proclamation, it's called, not an executive order, that really didn't do very much.
Yes. Well, that's a perfect segue because
I'm here to set them up for you.
Yes, I know. And I'm just, woo! I've been playing a lot of pickleball lately. So this is like you're setting me up for a slam here. Yeah. So we haven't talked since the original proclamation came down. And of course, a lot of us in the immigration enforcement and ending mass migration side of the spectrum have been doing everything that we can to raise heck about it and try to educate people on all of the different temporary foreign worker pipelines that were completely untouched. So, what's your read on what's going to happen? Because we've been, again, it's that, TikTok.
Yep.
We've been awaiting some announcement of expansion of that ban, so-called ban.
So in April, what the president did was limit some green card issuances. Yeah. People who weren't already here, so that half of green cards are given to people who are already here. So it only applied to people who weren't here. And then it exempted all kinds of people. So our estimate was something like maybe each month 5% of green cards were suspended, and they weren't even canceled; they were just delayed. So that was disappointing. Let me put it that way. But the president said in that order he was having his people give him recommendations about guest worker programs, because this only dealt with green cards. So what guest worker programs to suspend? This is the H-1B that people are familiar with, and H-2B, and all kinds of stuff like that. Well, those recommendations have been submitted, and now the two sides, the Jeb Bush element within the White House and the immigration restrictionists, have been basically in a kind of tug of war over what a follow-up proclamation should have in it. And I'm hearing that we should be seeing it like today. Tomorrow. Yeah. And I've been hearing that the president kind of finally, he was being pushed about, let's exempt this, exempt that, make the computer companies need to get these people, the nursery, the landscapers want their people. And apparently the president finally got somebody to tell him, look, you can't do that. It's got to just be suspend them, have a few exceptional exceptions, but that's it. And he said, yeah, let's just do it, suspend it all. So we'll see. Until it's actually issued, we don't know. But I have hopes that, it's not going to be nothing. I mean, it's not going to be everything I want and all that, but it's not going to be a complete fizzle, just cosmetic baloney, which is what I was afraid of. And frankly, I still fear it until I actually see the proclamation.
Yes, that's right. We'll believe it when we see it. Right. So at best, then, what we're going to get is a 180-day extension. At best. At best.
Yeah, it may not be. I don't think it's going to be that long, actually.
Really? Yeah. Jeez.
Yeah. And we got 40 million unemployed people. Why on earth would we be importing anybody? I mean, the H-2B program, not to get into the alphabet soup, but it's for seasonal, unskilled work that's not farming. So a lot of these people are landscapers, they're tree trimmers, people working in hotels, that sort of thing. Why would we be importing anybody to do that? It's ridiculous. And even the H-1B, which everybody is mostly computer people, the companies sell that as best and brightest. These are all, is this flow of Einsteins we're bringing in here. Come on. Most of them do routine computer work that there are plenty of unemployed people among the 40 million people who filed for unemployment who could do that work. I mean, it's just ridiculous. So there's no excuse for any of it ever. It might be for 180 days. It might be through the end of the year. That would actually be encouraging. That would be not quite 6 months worth, but well, maybe it would be something. Actually, it would be. So fingers crossed. But even if it's 60 days and it's renewable, I'll take something as long as it doesn't have a lot of exemptions and exceptions to it, because that is the sign of lobbyist sort of swamp activity.
Yes,
You see what I mean?
Yes, and the more sunlight there is on how it actually works, because every Immigration Reform Act has been riddled with all of those intentional loopholes and exemptions and waivers. That is how it works. I had heard yesterday that one of the loopholes that Open Borders Incorporated had been lobbying very aggressively for was an exemption for foreign au pairs.
Yeah, au pairs. Oh, absolutely.
How do you think this plays with normal Americans? I mean, we both have children in their teens, and a lot of them are out of work. They've had their normal school existences taken away from them, and whether it's childcare or the kind of seasonal non-agricultural slots that you're talking about. Those are jobs that should go to American kids, not foreigners. But
absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, au pairs. Look, I mean, I've met a bunch of au pairs. I know people who have au pairs. Perfectly normal. There's nothing wrong with them. But it's a cheap labor program. Yes. I mean, it's under a cultural exchange visa. That's the rationale for it.
Yep.
It's baloney. I mean, it's to provide cheap white labor. That's the key, frankly, for a lot of the people who use it.
Yes.
To upper middle class and wealthy American women who don't want to have to take care of their own kids. I mean,
exactly. And that's that is what the DC swamp is made of, those kinds of people. And to think that they're lobbying inside the White House now in order to outsource not only everybody else's jobs, but their own main job as a parent.
To raise children. Yeah. And frankly, I've heard that even people we think would be on our side have been pushing for the au pair exception.
Here's my shocked face, Mark.
Yeah. I've been told it's not going to happen, but I was told that 2 days ago, and you never know, things can change from hour to hour. But that would be a ridiculous thing to allow au pairs. I'm sorry. Again, they're perfectly fine people. There's nothing wrong with them. They're college girls from Europe. But so you raise your kids, you raise your own kids, you know what I mean? And find, there's plenty of American young girls who are, taking a year off of college, or maybe you're out of college and don't want to work at Starbucks, would rather, help with childcare as a job for a year or so before they go back to school or whatever. Find them, it's not Congress's job to give you Irish nannies.
Yes, exactly. So another sector we haven't talked about, and I had a bunch of medical school graduates, American medical school graduates, an interesting, diverse range of them, pushing back against another Open Borders Inc. piece of propaganda that we have a doctor shortage. And in the wake of COVID, it is an absolute emergency to approve 40 or 50,000 new visas for foreign doctors. Who is it? David Perdue who's sponsoring that legislation?
Unfortunately, yeah. He's done some okay stuff in the past, but and it's not just him. There's all kinds of. I mean, congressmen are easily swayed by this stuff. One of the reasons you have all this tech immigration, I'll get to the doctors thing.
Yeah.
Is these congressmen, most of them don't even know how to turn their computers on. You know what I mean? So somebody says, well, they just say some computer gibberish. Yeah. Linux, C prompt. Oh wow! Oh my gosh! Here's your visas.
Python. Okay, that fifth graders know.
They're easily impressed. And the doctor thing is similar in a sense, because they figure, wow, doctors, that's good. We need more doctors. Let's have more doctors. Well, first of all, unemployment among doctors has actually gone up. Now, it's not high. I mean, you're a doctor. You're pretty skilled. Frankly, if you couldn't practice medicine, you'll get a job doing something else. You're presumably a pretty high IQ, capable person. But unemployment, even among doctors, has gone up. why on earth would we import more? And the people you were talking to is something I actually didn't know much about until last year. American medical students, they graduate, they're medical doctors, they're MDs, they pass their tests, so it's not like they're the rejects. But if they can't get residencies, which is like almost like an apprenticeship that doctors have to have, and it's a good that they do that, then they can't practice medicine. They just spent 8 years in college getting a degree. They weren't flunked out. But if they don't impress the interviewer for a residency, and we're importing foreign doctors to take these residencies, it's unspeakable that we even allow this, quite frankly. And it's even adding insult to injury to say we have these American fully trained, competent doctors. We're not going to let them practice because they didn't wow the interviewer to get a residency. But we're going to import foreign doctors to take their jobs. I mean, it's like I said, it's unspeakable that we even allow this.
Yes, that's right. And then one of the doctors mentioned too, which is something I hadn't thought about, which is the racket perpetuates itself because then many of the foreign doctors themselves become program directors, and then they're choosing who's getting in the residency program.
You see that. Yeah, you see that in the H-1B business too.
Yes,
where
that's the
former
parallel.
H-1Bs. H-1B is basically an India program. I mean, it's not just Indians, but it's mainly Hindu men from southern India. I mean, it's that specific. They dominate the program. And then once they get green cards, you have ethnic hiring. And it's not even like it's evil. It's just you hire people you're comfortable with. Well, that's not right. You know what I mean? So, and the system perpetuates it.
Exactly. I want to talk about the recommendations that you and the Center for Immigration Studies put together last month, 20 presidential actions needed to reduce work visas and permits. And, if Mark Krikorian were president, this country would be a hell of a lot better off. And I wanted to talk specifically about a couple of them. And
don't wish that on me, please.
I know.
Anyway, yes, go ahead.
I know. So the first one that I wanted to mention was EB-5. And of course, you and I have done a lot of work on this, and your scholars as well. Number 15 on the list, suspend adjudication of EB-5 investor immigrant visas and adjustment applications. Why should people care about this program?
EB-5 is investor visas. And so like I said with the high tech or the medical things, the word investor, congressmen all get weak in the knees. You know what I mean? Except it's a complete scam. I mean, it would be one thing if we sold green cards for a lot of money. In other words, if you gave $10 million to the federal treasury, I still think it's a bad idea, but at least you could see that, okay, we're getting something out of it. This EB-5 program is a total scam. It's mainly Chinese investors, and all they have to do is put now $900,000 for 2 years into a investment in a supposedly underserved area. It's supposed to be, run down parts of cities or rural areas.
Blighted.
And you get a green card. And then you can just get all your money back too. After the 2 years, you just cash out of the investment. You don't have to run a business. You don't have to do any of that stuff. Well, the underserved areas, there's no definition. There's no rules. So that until the rules tightened up just a little bit recently, you would just draw a line around Bed-Stuy in New York, which is a terrible area, and then cross the East River into Midtown Manhattan, and then keep your pencil going. And that's an area. And you say this, and the average unemployment is very high in this area. And so we're going to invest in a high-end real estate project in Midtown Manhattan. It is, again, our immigration system is so shot through with dishonesty and just naked lying that I'm so jaded about this, even I get surprised. And the EB-5 program is one of the more dishonest programs. And so our suggestion here was first of all, why didn't they suspend it in the earlier proclamation? Because there was a specific carve out for it.
Yes.
I don't want to say that the president's son-in-law made sure it was in there, but his family has made extensive use of EB5.
They have. Yeah.
It's basically cheap investment money. These are real estate projects in Beverly Hills and Manhattan that would have no problem getting bank loans. It's just that it's a lower interest rate on the bank loans, because part of what they're offering is not just extra money, in other words, extra interest to have your money. The American people are giving them a green card for which they're happy to take a lower interest rate. The whole program should be abolished. It's a total scam. They've even gotten Republican and Democrat together on legislation to reform it, at least, and tighten it up a lot. And I mean, guys like Durbin, who's terrible on immigration, has gotten together with Grassley. In other words, the problem is Chuck Schumer and John Cornyn, specifically in the Senate, Democrat and Republican, have always gotten together to kill efforts to fix it. So my specifically on this recommendation, this is a short-term thing, but there's no reason to not suspend EB5 visas as we're suspending everything else.
Yes, and there's a couple of reasons. Of course, the pandemic created conditions.
Sure.
But as well, of course, President Trump has been the biggest saber rattler about China,
right,
and guarding against, national security threats and all that. And in my research, I haven't seen that EB5 specifically has been exploited by agents of China. But why give them another avenue?
Yeah, well, and what do we not yet know? You know what I mean?
That's a really good point.
Now, a lot of cases, these are people who are trying to park money outside the country as a kind of and get a green card as an escape hatch. You know what I mean? If things go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you make enough money in communist China to have $900,000 to spare? And more than that, really, because there's all kinds of fees you have to pay to middlemen and fixers. Where do you get $1 million in China if you aren't in some way in bed with the Chi Coms? You know what I mean?
That is a great point. And
doesn't mean you have to be a spy, but you are compromised. There's just no question about it.
Yes, that's exactly right. And this seemed to be something that sort of the mainstream of the Republican Party understood when Terry McAuliffe was mixed up in it with the electric car company and China. And they were pretty gung-ho about calling attention to it then. But of course, once Jared Kushner's family's hand was in the till, Haley Barbour, been involved in one of these, real estate conglomerates. That's what is it? The EB5 centers.
Those are like the middle that arrange the things and make a pile of money and become a lobby to keep this thing going because that's their everyday business. And there's two issues here in addition. One is, I think one of the rationales, maybe in internal discussions they offered is, but this program requires the creation of 10 jobs for the investment, which is total. I'm sorry. Can I say this? Can I say crapola? Can I say crapola?
Yes.
Total crap, because you show that you created 10 jobs any way you want. So they just pay some economist, here, come up with some Mickey Mouse way of showing we created 10 jobs. You don't have to hire 10 people.
Yes.
The other thing is, and this is an argument, a political argument for suspending it, is the president and the administration in general needs to show that they're taking a hit as well as everybody else. You see what I mean? And in other words, the fact that the Kushner family has used this program is actually an argument for suspending it. So they can say, look, this is against our own interests, but we're doing it because it's the right thing to do for the country. You see what I mean?
Yes.
That's why H-2B, the program that I said that, for hotel workers and landscapers, the president's properties use this program a lot.
Mar-a-Lago, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And other ones too.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems to me it's important as a matter of, kind of political hygiene, if you will, to say, look, my properties use this program. I've benefited from it. It's legal. Maybe we shouldn't have it at all, but it's there. And, it's irresponsible for me not to use it if you were to say that. I think he said that during the primaries. But this, for the good of everybody has to take a haircut here. Everybody has to share in this suffering. Yeah. And so that's why I'm suspending this program, even though my people use it. That's essential for the administration to be able to say. And if they don't suspend H-2B, even if they're not doing it for selfish reasons, because the president isn't making money off of being president. I mean, that's ludicrous. That's commie nonsense, quite frankly. But the appearance is still there. And you need to be more virtuous than Caesar's wife if you're in a position of authority.
Oh, how rare it would be to have a political show of do as I do. Yeah, well, whoever does that. Yeah. That's right.
Dream on.
I know. A little Aerosmith cue there. So a couple of the other items that I wanted you to talk about on your 20 presidential actions needed to reduce work visas and permits. A couple at the end were interesting to me. Number 17. Implement a public outreach campaign for U.S. workers who have been furloughed by employers who keep visa workers on the job and similar incidents of apparent preference or discrimination in favor of visa workers.
Because this kind of thing happens in a lot of companies. We've heard incidences of it where company has a bunch of workers. They have to cut back. Their businesses, I understand that. But they keep the foreign workers on visas. I'm not talking about immigrants.
Yes.
Immigrants who have green cards are like Americans in waiting. They're going to be able to apply for citizenship. And for job stuff, they are and should be treated in almost every respect, other than like the post office, because they're not citizens yet, as Americans. This is about people who are just here on temporary work visas. And there are companies, lots of them, that have laid off Americans, but kept the visa workers. And there's no excuse for that at all. And so the point here would be to make sure that we know about that in an organized, systematic way. There's a way for people, basically whistleblowers is kind of what this recommendation is. Set up a whistleblower mechanism. So Americans, if they get furloughed while visa workers are still working, the government knows about it. And frankly, the public knows about it. And the media, to the extent any of them care, know about it. And we, again, shine some light on that. And frankly, you might not even have to do a lot of enforcement. You might, if you just publicized it, it would probably go a long way to preventing that from happening.
I think it's a brilliant idea. And, there are anecdotes out there. There are people on social media who are whistleblowing about it, the body shopping and the benching practices of these companies that are keeping these visa workers here on the job while they're furloughing American citizen employees. And I guess it's just distressing to me, Mark, that, we elected this president because of things like bringing the Disney workers up on stage to talk about what had happened to them. And they've been completely abandoned in all of this.
And they're none too happy about it. I mean, they're not going to be getting on any stages with the president this election, that's for sure.
And that is a warning that needs to be made explicit to the swamp, because if they do as little as possible, and if whatever this proclamation is with regard to expanding the ban looks like, if it looks more like kabuki theater, people are going to stay home. I mean, to me, it's unimaginable to think of voting for what you call the ventriloquist dummy. But, I think a lot of the types of folks that voted for him on these specific issues might be driven to do such a thing.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
I mean, think how many people were there who were Obama Trump voters? I mean, millions of them.
Yes.
So those people, in other words, they're not really conservative, at least not in the conventional sense that we are. But, they're pro-American. They love their country. They're not communists, like unfortunately too many of the people on the left are, but they're probably pro-union, and maybe, they don't worry about gay stuff particularly, whatever. In other words, they're kind of middle of the road-ish. A lot of those people want people to shake something up. So they voted for Obama because he was different. Maybe he was going to shake things up. I mean, that's what I thought in 2008, maybe. Didn't work out that way. Well, he shook them up, but in a bad way. And then they voted for Trump because, again, something different. Things aren't working. Let's vote for the outsider, the different guy. If Trump doesn't show that he's actually shaking things up in a way other than just tweeting and getting the newspapers' heads to explode, but actually making real changes, a lot of those people might vote for Biden, or they'll just stay home and not vote at all. So this is a real danger that I think the president doesn't understand. Hopefully he does. I don't know. But and I think it's more than immigration, too. I mean, we don't do elections at the center, but I mean, just as a private citizen, the president's response to like these riots has been weak. To this transgender ruling has been almost, supine.
Yes.
And, remember what Osama bin Laden said, people will go for the strong horse over the weak horse. President is in danger of becoming the weak horse, and Biden ain't no strong horse, I'll tell you that. But whoever is the actual ventriloquist that has their hand up his back telling him what to say, which might be Kamala Harris, it's looking like now,
know, with Amy Klobuchar stepping aside. Yes.
Yeah. Well, she was out anyway because of the Minneapolis riots and everything. She had no choice, no chance. But my point is, there are a lot of people who might say, okay, well, let's go with Biden. He seems like a nice man, and it's dangerous. I mean, I think the president does not understand the potential for danger. He's 12, 14 points behind in polls. And, polls don't mean that much, but they don't mean nothing either, So bold action on this without a lot of silly, hyperbolic rhetoric, quite honestly, shooting, shotgun blast to the face and this kind of from his tweets. Skip that and actually do something. That's the way you're going to earn people's votes.
I think that's the way a lot of people feel, whether they identify themselves as America First voters or whether they're independents. If this president doesn't do something more than tweet law and order in all capital letters.
I mean, that's good. I'm not even against that, but that has to then turn into something.
That's right. Where's the meat?
Right. Yeah. Where's the beef? Remember that TV show? Where's the beef? What was it? Wendy's or I forget what it was.
Yeah. Before they were
burned down. Yeah. Did you see Mark Stein did a thing on Tucker's show, and that Chaz is going to have an Olympics, and they're going to take the torch from one burning Wendy's to the other across the world. Anyway.
We have to laugh grimly at it all, and we have a couple minutes left here. You and I have lived through decades of this kind of roller coaster of disruption and anarchy, and at the heart of it, has been the failures to enforce our immigration laws and to enforce the rule of law equally between citizens and non-citizens. And I mean, I think we're seeing that in all of these cities, which of course it's not a coincidence, are also sanctuary cities, right? Yep. That have surrendered their police departments. And of course, to the extent that some private citizens have tried to stand up against this and fill the void that the police have left, they've been targeted, they've been harassed, they've been doxxed. Some of them are now in jail, like the man in New Mexico who had stood in defense of a monument there. It's crazy. I mean, what do you see for the future of what I'm calling end stage America?
Well, I mean, if the authorities aren't exercising authority, people take it into their own hands. I mean, you see that's what the Minuteman thing was about the border. Yes. And, those people were smeared about, they were just sort of retirees with lawn chairs and walkie-talkies. But they said, look, nobody's doing this. So we're going to drive down there, set up our lawn chairs and get our binoculars out and call the Border Patrol and tell them people are coming. And that's a benign form of direct citizen action. And it's a good thing. I mean, it shows civic engagement. Years before that, there was a woman who, when San Diego border was out of control, because now it's actually way better. I mean, but partly because of what she did was called I think, light up the border. She got a whole bunch of her friends.
Yes.
They drove down to the border where literally thousands of people were just swarming across every night and pointed their cars and just put their high beams on and lit up the border. That kind of citizen action is actually beneficial and is the kind of thing we want to see more of. But if it doesn't get results, you get increasingly potentially harmful citizen action, vigilantism. And that's bad for democracy. I mean, people have to protect themselves, protect their families. So, I mean, look, I'm armed. Where I live, nothing happens. So I've only used my weapons at the range. I haven't even gone that often. I'm no firearms enthusiast. It's a tool like a car. I don't take my car apart either. You know what I mean? But the point is, I don't want to have to protect myself. I'd rather that we had a society where people followed the rules and there were police to make sure those who broke the laws were, didn't get away with it. But if, whether it's immigration law or anything else, long enough, the authorities abdicate their responsibility, more and more people are going to take the law into their own hands. And that is a recipe for chaos. And we don't, even those conservatives who kind of say, well, we have all the guns and we'll win. Yeah, nobody wins. Nobody wins. We want a society where the rules are followed most of the time by most people and the authorities do their jobs. That's what we've been fighting for in immigration and what people generally have been fighting for in all kinds of, other areas of policy. If we don't have that, things can get bad.
Yeah, and they are getting bad, especially with this phenomenon of blue flu spreading across.
If you were an Atlanta cop, would you show up for work? I don't know. You know what I mean? I can't judge anybody. People have, kids in college, they got bills to pay. I get all of that. But if your superiors, political superiors, are going to hang you out to dry anytime you do your job, why would you show up? What do people expect is going to happen? Heather McDonald's written about, the Ferguson effect, where we saw the same thing in Ferguson, Missouri. We're going to have an explosion of crime. Even the cops who don't walk off the beat are going to be, I'm in the shade. I'm parked in the shade here. Am I going to go and take the chance that my life will be destroyed and I'll lose my house and my family will, be homeless just to deal with, some domestic disturbance that, isn't really my problem? No, I'm just going to sit here and finish my coffee. You're going to have more and more of that. You're going to have more and more crime. And at some point, I'm hoping there'll be a kind of a pushback like we saw to the late 60s, unrest. But, I'm not betting on it, quite honestly. I don't know.
I was hoping we wouldn't end on such a black-pilled no.
Yeah, what can I say?
Thanks, Mark.
Buy ammo.
Yeah, that's right. Get thee to the range.
Yeah, right. Yes. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time. And I want to urge everyone to go to cis.org. That is the website, a repository of must-read and must-digest analysis and information from the Center for Immigration Studies. And Mark, look, I even have a little banner for your Twitter.
Yeah, there it is. Mark S. Krikorian, S as in Stephen. That's for people who have a taste for snark and sarcasm. So,
well, and I love it. And we didn't even get to talk about D&D, which we'll have to do next time.
Yeah, let's my kids do that. I actually don't know anything about it. It's my kids who do it.
We'll have to rope in your kids for a family life.
I'll be happy to do it.
All right. Thanks, Mark. Keep up all the great work.
You too. Thank you, Michelle.